Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of All Angles. I'm Dion Jax-Miller. Now, in today's program, we're going to be taking a look back at two very special programs that we carried over the past 2 weeks as part of our Jamaica 60 series of programs. First, a Prime-ministerial conversation, a sit-down with former Prime Ministers Bruce Golding and PJ Patterson, and then Girl from Woodhall, the story of Portia Simpson Miller. And joining me to look at the issues arising from those programs, I have political scientist and commentator Dr. Paul Ashley, Group Head of News here at the RGR Gleaner News Center, and also with us on Zoom, we have attorney at law Daniel Archer. So let's go into our first clip, reminding you, of course, you can tweet along with us, hashtag TVJ All Angles. You can also WhatsApp us. It's 3810072, 3810072. And of course, it's Milton Walker who is with us. I did not forget your name, Milton. Milton Walker, who is the Group Head of News and Sports here at the RGR Gleaner Group. You know something? I could just go to the first clip from Prime-ministerial conversation in which Mr. Golding and Mr. Patterson were talking about the removal of the Queen as Jamaica's head of state.
Everybody has a different style. My style is to work to achieve results that provide a national consensus. Posturing doesn't work. So it's no point my tabling a bill unless I have reason to believe that it is going to be able to get the constitutional support. I was ready to do that, but he asked for time. Unfortunately, soon after that, there were difficulties within his own party, to which I need not make reference here. So we never got any further, but there was an agreement in principle. I only had one meeting with Mr. Golding when he assumed the leadership of the Labour Party, and even before he really had become legally the leader of the opposition. And I raised the question again with him, and he said to me, PJ, I have just taken leadership. I have appointed a committee chaired by Mr. Dwight Nelson, and we have to wait on their recommendations. So that's the reason why I never tabled anything.
Well, it's a nice segue to Mr. Golding. So let me ask you to pick up there, Mr. Golding, from your perspective.
Yeah, there was general agreement between both government and opposition from way back in 1995. Remember the commission that PJ appointed, chaired by Justice Carr and subsequently by Dr. Lloyd Barnett after Justice Carr died. That had made some recommendations which went to a joint select committee of Parliament. And both government and opposition signed off. We need to replace the Queen with a Jamaican head of state. Where we ran into the problem is how is that Jamaican head of state to be chosen?
Thank you so much for staying with us. We continue with you on All Angles. I'm Dion Jax-Miller. We're getting comment on the two big programs we carried over the past 2 weeks, Prime-ministerial conversation as well as Girl from Woodhall. I'm going to go to another clip now. In this one, former Prime Ministers Golding and Patterson were talking about the Caribbean Court of Justice and replacing the Privy Council with the Caribbean Court of Justice as Jamaica's final court of appeal. And Mr. Patterson started by explaining some of the positions that Mr. Seaga, former Prime Minister Seaga, also had taken. So let's go to this.
Mr. Seaga argued at that point, criticize him for it if you will. Okay, fine, you have met all these concerns that we have raised, but this is a brand new court. Let us see it operate for 10 years, and then we can decide whether or not we want to embrace it as our final court. It has been in operation now for not 10 years, but 17 years. I have observed the court very closely. I've read many of its decisions. I'm impressed, not only with the quality, I'm not a lawyer, but having participated in lawmaking for so many years, I have an appreciation for how law is interpreted. I'm impressed not only with the quality of the decisions, but with how easy it is to read them and understand them. Very, very impressed. And therefore, I'm at a position now where I would be prepared to vote yes tomorrow to do away with the Privy Council and to establish the CCJ as our final court. One last point I make on this. The danger with insisting, PJ has already expressed his firm opposition to it. The danger of insisting that it be subject to a referendum is that that's not what people will be voting on. And I worry if the determination of my final court, that if I need to access it, the decision as to what is my final court and who are the judges that I will have to confront, is going to be made on the basis of who it is who got the money to go and vote, or who it is that complained that, boy, the MP never get the work for him, so whatever the MP is telling him to do, I'm going to do the opposite. That's reckless, that's dangerous. And I don't think it's something that we could even afford to come to that.
As counsel would say, I endorse his views as my own. I have nothing further to usefully add.
Okay, and if you're thinking to yourself, that's not how I remember the conversation, we've edited portions of it for time, all right? Milton, let me let you pick up, because I think a lot of people are surprised hearing Mr. Golding express his views. I mean, strong endorsement of the Caribbean Court of Justice, saying he would vote for it tomorrow, and also a proposal he had mooted while Prime Minister for a Jamaican third-tier court, saying it wasn't something he personally had agreed with and wouldn't go along with now.
Right, and of course the other interesting thing is just the unanimity of their views, the both leaders expressing their views. You know, the issues don't seem intractable. I mean, I know with the CCJ, there were some differences. Mr. Siagas at one point, particularly in the 90s, did not seem to trust the court, the CCJ, and or getting rid of the Privy Council. I remember he famously said that, you know, he thinks pure justice is, you know, you'd get it only at the Privy Council. I think for him, his views evolved, and later on in his political life, I think he did come to appreciate it. And I'm just always puzzled why we couldn't have come together to get that, and particularly when we spent so much money to help set up and to fund this court. It's US dollars, wholly for them, right? And yeah, because we're one of the largest contributors to the court, and we're really not using it. We use it in a few instances, as you know. And it's the same thing again with the removal of the Queen. Although I would say one thing in terms of the removal of the Queen, I don't know for sure if 30, 40 years ago, if we even attempted to get the process going, if it would have been successful at the referendum stage. I think until, you know, fairly recently, there may have been a small majority for keeping the monarchy. And in the younger people, of course, are less tied to those old structures and so on. But back in those days, the older folks who generally are voters, you know, there's still a lot of feeling. Remember in the 80s when the Queen came in 82, and I don't remember when the other time, there were crowds that came and greeted her and people waving flags and lining the streets.
Well, there were crowds that greeted William and Kate the other day.
Right, yeah. So, you know, and our own poll, which we released recently, I think it was 56%. That, to me, should really be about 86% in a country like Jamaica. We're so fiercely proud and culturally independent. We punch above our weight on the international stage.
The Queen.
And, you know, we're
Queen.
only 56%.
Yeah.
supporting the removal of the monarchy. I'm a little disappointed with that figure.
Daniel, let me let you pick up. And as well, if you could comment on the referendum issue as well, because as we know, this is something the Prime Minister has said he wants to do. He calls it a grand referendum. We've seen...
But it's not necessary.
It's not necessary legally for most of the issues he wants to deal with. And plus, we've seen those kinds of ballots with multiple issues fail in other countries. But the administration seems set on it. These two former prime ministers have said it's a bad idea.
Education. I heard, as I listened to Milton speak, I came to the consensus that we don't spend enough time educating our population as to the importance of this. We don't share with them the importance of governance and how important it is that they participate. The fact that the Queen is non-existent in terms of how your role as an element of governance. I think, Dion, that the multiplicity of issues that the Prime Minister has advanced, that he says he wants the consensus, takes away from the important role the government plays in educating the population as to these issues. Having it on a ballot, I don't think is going to get that kind of support because we're going to lose out. We're going to fail, as we have done before, in educating the population on these issues so that they can vote on them with the kind of sense of purpose. We have no... We like to compare ourselves to Singapore, and we can see the transition that was made from 1953 to 1990 when there was that prime minister who saw colonialism and was able to extricate themselves and become a developed country. We don't have that sense of civic-mindedness, nationalism.
Anymore.
And if we are, well, the extent to which we had it is arguably true, but I would dare say that we are not even at that point where we can consider that we are the agents of governance. And so I think even if we were to have a referendum, I think they're kicking it down the road. Nobody wants to take the responsibility because it means that they're going to have to give up something and they're going to have to unite for one particular issue and get it done. Nobody wants to get that done. Don't forget that there are going to be things that are going to be lost because this is not what you're talking about. The Governor General and the element of classism and society that you get from it. We're going to have to make that change. Nobody wants to do the nitty-gritty to make the change possible. You kick it down the road. If the people don't want it, well, they don't want it. Yeah. Nobody's educating them as to why it is that this change must be made.
And the point about education you made is so important because a colleague messaged me while the program was going on saying I was in a bar chatting to an elderly returned resident the other day. He asked me in all seriousness whether leaving the Queen would negatively affect his status as a British citizen. So there is, yeah. So there's a lot of misunderstanding.
And you wanted commentary on the CCJ as well. I think that too is laziness on the part of our legislators. Everybody wants to be able to kick it down the road and make it a decision that has to be done by a referendum, which we all know doesn't have to be that. We can have the same kind of education, and we have to accept the CCJ has been around for 17 years. Their judgments are expressly sound. If you were to look at them, which I've had the benefit of doing in preparation for tonight, there you look at the substance of those judgments and you can see that they're giving you even more reason than the Privy Council judgments.
Oh so, no, the Privy Council judgments nowadays are so thin you can't sit through them.
Yeah, 4 pages. The least amount of pages in the Privy Council judgments between 2019 and now have been 4 pages.
And you know, there are many...
When you look at the CCJ judgments, one judgment was 176. Now, I'm not saying the paper makes it worthwhile. I'm saying that they put out a lot into explaining in layman's terms as best as possible
and
why they have a decision.
Hold that thought for me, guys. I'm at the break again. I know we have so much to talk about, but we'll be back in a moment. Remember our WhatsApp line. It's 3810072. Soon come.